I was thrilled when I learned I was becoming a grandmother. Then the word grandmother made time suddenly feel very visible. Today I want to talk about that feeling that arrived beside the joy. Hi, I'm Leslie. Welcome to Coffee with Leslie. Subscribe if you enjoy honest conversations about the moments that quietly change us. Recently, my daughter and her husband told us they are expecting their first baby. The news landed exactly as you would imagine. I was delighted for them. Then I heard myself say that I was going to become a grandmother. And the sentence felt unexpectedly large in my mouth. The feeling was neither sadness nor reluctance. The word simply carried more meaning than I had prepared myself for. Until then, growing older had felt gradual enough to ignore. A birthday would arrive, pass, and leave me feeling much the same as I had the week before. Becoming a grandmother, however, felt different. That title gathered decades of my life into one moment and placed them directly in front of me. I could remember being a young mother with surprising clarity. The woman I had been did not feel far enough away for my daughter to be entering that same part of life. Yet there she was, preparing for a baby of her own. I had somehow traveled from one side of motherhood to the other without noticing the exact point where the distance became so great. That was the feeling I had not expected. Rather than making me feel old, the news made me aware of time, which is not quite the same thing. Inside my own mind, I still sounded like myself. I was still building a YouTube channel and wondering what I might create next. Nothing within me had suddenly changed into the settled woman I had once imagined a grandmother would be. The title arrived before my understanding could catch up with it. I had always pictured a grandmother as someone standing near the finished end of her own story, fully silver-haired and wrinkled. That picture never made much sense, but I had carried it without even examining it up until that point. Now the word belonged to me, and I could see how incomplete the image had been. My life felt active, uncertain, and surprisingly new, rather than finished. At the same time, the family story had moved me into a very different position. For years, I had been the mother guiding a child through the beginning of life. Now I was watching that child prepare to guide someone else. There was enormous pride in seeing her reach that point. Alongside it sat the strange recognition that I was no longer standing where I used to stand. Life had moved us both forward. I only noticed the distance when I saw her approaching a place I remembered so well. A new baby creates a future for a family, but this baby also made the past suddenly easier for me to see. I began wondering what my own mother had felt when I became a parent. At that time, I was completely absorbed in my own transition. I never considered that my new identity had altered hers as well. She had become a grandmother while watching me step into a role she already understood. I can see now that family milestones rarely belong to only one person emotionally, even when one person is clearly at the center of them. Someone begins a new chapter, and everyone who loves them has to find a slightly different place around it. That movement can be beautiful without being simple. My daughter is the one becoming a mother. This is her experience. My place is close to it, but it is not inside it. That distinction has required more thought than I anticipated. As a mother, I was used to being responsible for decisions that affected my children. Becoming a grandmother asks me to care deeply while respecting that the decisions now belong to them. The difference became real when the pregnancy brought medical uncertainty. Doctors raised concerns about possible health issues with the baby, and suddenly the future we had started imagining became difficult to picture. Our excitement remains, although it has become much more careful. I found myself waiting for updates that could change everything while knowing I had no influence over what those updates would say. Watching my daughter and her husband carry that uncertainty has been painful. Part of becoming a parent is developing the instinct to move toward your child when something is wrong. Adulthood leaves that instinct intact while removing much of your ability to act on it. I could not change what the doctors were investigating. My role was to remain near enough that they did not have to carry that uncertainty alone. That form of love felt quieter than the love I knew when my daughter was small. It also demanded more restraint. There are moments when helping means taking action. This was a moment when helping meant allowing two adults to lead their own difficult experience. I was still their mom and mother-in-law, but I was not the person at the center of decisions. That boundary made me feel the new family structure more clearly than the title grandmother ever could. The pregnancy announcement had become my first experience of loving this baby while being unable to protect them. Although I have yet to meet this child, their well-being already matters to me in a way that feels very immediate. That attachment has surprised me. I had imagined love would begin when I held the baby for the first time. Instead, it began inside uncertainty. The baby has already created a place in our family before any of us knew how the story will unfold. That realization helps me understand the unexpected feeling more clearly. It was vulnerability. Joy had opened a new place in my heart, and worry had entered through the same opening. Rather than canceling each other out, those two feelings made the experience much more honest. We often imagine excitement as a clean emotion that arrives without complication. Real life rarely gives us anything in such a pure form. The joy arrived in a family that already knew how quickly circumstances could change. It came with hope rather than certainty. That did not make the baby any less wanted. It made every piece of reassuring news feel more precious. I also began hearing the word grandmother differently. At first, it sounded like a statement about my age. Gradually, it started sounding like the name of a relationship that did not exist yet. A family title can be assigned before two people even meet. The meaning comes later through the ordinary moments that build a connection. That thought comforts me. There is no role that I need to perfect before the baby arrives. Meeting this child as the person I already am will be enough. The relationship will create its own definition over time. That thought released me from an image I had never chosen. In my imagination, grandmothers were endlessly certain women who had finished wondering what they might become. I continue wondering while building a life that contains ambitions of my own. Becoming a grandmother simply adds another relationship to a life that remains in motion. I had unconsciously treated family roles as though one title just replaced another. The word grandmother seemed to suggest that motherhood had moved into the past. Nothing about this pregnancy has felt that way. My relationship with my daughter has not disappeared. It is changing as she becomes responsible for someone else. I remain her mother, although the way I love her has to make room for the adult she has become. The new title adds to my identity rather than erasing anything. That may be the part of this experience that reaches beyond change. Love can give us a new name before we feel ready to recognize ourselves inside it. What unsettles us is not always the change itself. Sometimes it is the speed with which the outside world seems to understand something our inner life has barely begun to process. Other people could congratulate me and say grandma with complete ease. I smile every time. Inside, I was still turning the word around and discovering what it touched. The word returned to me the year I spent raising my daughter and made the passage of time impossible to ignore. I had to make room for the possibility that unfinished people can become grandparents. We can enter a new family role without having solved ourselves first. That is not the lesson I'm trying to hand to anyone. It is simply the realization I needed for myself. I had confused age with arrival. Becoming a grandmother is showing me that life does not deliver a final version of us before giving us something new to hold. The new chapter arrives while the previous questions are still open. That feels much more truthful than the picture I carried. There is another shift I am only beginning to understand. For much of my adult life, I was busy creating the rhythm of our immediate family. This baby will grow inside a rhythm created by my daughter and her husband. I will be part of the support around it rather than the person directing it. That beautiful change also contains a small letting go. My daughter is not only an adult living her own life now, she is becoming the beginning of someone else's earliest memories. Seeing her in that position has changed the way I look at her. I still remember the child I raised, but that memory can no longer be the only version I see. She is stepping into a life I cannot design for her. My task is not to stand in front of that change. It is to witness it clearly enough to recognize who she is becoming. That is where I am now. Our family is still taking the pregnancy one stage at a time. We are supporting my daughter and her husband while hoping for the best possible outcome. Nothing has been neatly resolved, and I do not want to wrap the uncertainty in a cheerful conclusion it has not earned. The excitement and worry both remain real. What has changed is my understanding of why the news affected me so deeply. I thought becoming a grandmother would be entirely about welcoming a baby. It has also been about meeting a new version of my daughter and finding a new place for myself beside her. The baby has already changed the shape of our family without having entered the room. That is extraordinary. Although it can be difficult to explain when someone asks whether I am excited. Of course I am. The answer is simply larger than that. My excitement comes with the knowledge that something precious is approaching without any guarantee. The future is moving toward us, whether or not I feel completely prepared for my part in it. Lately, I have begun to wonder whether preparation is even the point. A relationship this new cannot be rehearsed. It can only be entered. For now, I am standing near the doorway. I know what the room will be called without yet knowing what it will feel like to live inside it. Perhaps that is why the word grandmother no longer feels like a closing door to me. It feels like the name written on a room I have not seen. Soon there will be a child inside that room who gives the word its real meaning. Until then, I am letting the feelings just remain complicated. I do not need to choose between joy and fear to prove that either one is genuine. Both are part of loving someone whose story has already begun beyond my control. The unexpected feeling was never that I did not want this. It was that sudden awareness that our family had crossed into a future I could remember imagining from the other side. As my daughter becomes a mother, I am becoming a grandmother without either of us leaving ourselves behind. We are meeting each other in new roles while waiting to meet this little person who created them. That is where the story rests today. Hope and uncertainty now share the same space, held together by love for a baby who has already made time, family, and my own identity look different. Welcome to Coffee with Lesli. I am very glad you're here. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.